Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, and we're going to be looking at the current correction with some perspective on prior drops by Bitcoin. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Now, anytime Bitcoin goes up or Bitcoin goes down, we always have a habit of comparing it to prior moves to get some type of context as to what is going on, and also to manage our expectations and to make sure that we have just in general, the right expectations. And so in this video, we're going to be looking at the current Bitcoin correction through the lens of the Relative Strength Index, or RSI. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing in this video. And we're going to be comparing it to prior corrections. We're going to see how far down have we come and how does that compare to what we've seen in the past, okay? So let's go ahead and jump in. We're going to first look at it on the daily time frame. And all we're going to do is just going to state observations that we're seeing, nothing more, nothing less. So right now, the daily RSI for Bitcoin is about 19, okay? Somewhere between 19 and 20. So it's pretty low right now. And it's always nice to just sort of draw a line in the sand and say, all right, well, this is where we are today. Where was Bitcoin when it was at these levels historically? And you know, what came next? And we're gonna take it back for a while. We're not just gonna look at what happened over the last few months or the last year. We're gonna look at a lot of history just to get some context here, so that we're not missing anything. We're not biasing our interpretation of the data based on a bullish market or based on a bearish market, but just looking at it for what it is. So one of the things that definitely stands out to me when I first look at this is we note that we are at a lower RSI than we were back in May, okay? And one of the things you should note is that the RSI, you know, when it's below 30, a lot of people would say that's technically oversold. When it's above 70, you would say it's overbought. Okay, so for instance, when Bitcoin was up in the 60K to 70K region up here, we were technically in overbought territory. The same thing could have been said though back in November when we were moving up relatively quickly as well, because we were moving up so quickly without having any consequential pullbacks. Okay, so you can see the RSI went up quite a bit, and then it finally pulled back when we finally started to cool off for a little bit. So on the daily RSI, it doesn't really tell you a ton about the macro move, but what it does show is sort of like what's going on the daily time frame on some of these shorter time frames. And one of the things we note is that we are lower than we were back in May, okay, when we first had that initial sell-off that took us all the way down to 29K. We are almost as low as we were back in March of 2020, but we're not quite there. Okay, so the RSI back in March of 2020 was actually around 15 to 16, so we're not actually quite there yet in terms of where the daily RSI is on Bitcoin. We also can see though that there were definitely times where, you know, we hit an RSI this low, like September of 2019, where we didn't really see a major move back up to the upside immediately, right? In fact, we still slowly bled, and then we popped up a little bit. And if you wanted to know the percentage that Bitcoin moved back up to the upside when it reached this level, it's about 30% move or so, approximately 30%. I mean, obviously nothing too crazy. And we also do know that you know, the market cap's higher today. We would somewhat expect volatility to be a little bit different, but I mean, a 30% move by Bitcoin even today would only get it to 45K. So I mean, that's not that substantial of a move. And then we can go further back and say, well, when have we gone below these levels, right? So like, how often have we actually gone below these levels? We can see that we hit this level back in 2019 or September 2019, and we've hit these levels a couple other times, but there were a couple times where we went below where we currently are, and that was in March of 2020, and we can also see a time in the end of 2018, so November, December of 2018 is the last time that we went to daily RSIs below the current level. What I find interesting is, and I've said this before, one of the things we've noted this cycle is that whenever Bitcoin decides it's heading somewhere, it tends to just go there rather than rather than just kind of hang out at a certain price level, it seems to be getting better at just going to the price that it wants to go to. And I think one of the ways we can sort of visualize that is to note that this current pullback on the daily RSI during the bear market of 2018, the daily RSI never actually got this bad, until the very end. Right? That's when it got this bad. It wasn't until the very end when we dropped 50% in a relatively short period of time. And that's the same thing we've done today, right? We've dropped 50% in a relatively short period of time. Now, Bitcoin also dropped more than that on the initial drop here, but the main difference between, say, this drop and that drop, and the reason why it's coming lower, is because this one was coming off of a parabolic rally that was an extremely strong rally. There was hardly any pullbacks at the time, whereas this one is coming off a phase of Bitcoin having gone up about 2x over a few months. It's a lot different than going up, let's say from maybe about 8x or 9x over the course of the same period of time. So you can see that the daily RSI for Bitcoin is as low today as it was almost as low as it was in March of 2020 and November, December of 2018. Now, I will say this. We could go lower from here. We would have to go lower from here if we're actually going to go to those RSI levels. Okay, so to get to, say, 14 or 15, or to get down to 9, which is what we saw back in November of 2018, which was almost the bottom. It was within the bottom of a few percent. We still have a little ways to go if we're going to go to those levels. But do note that the last time we were at this RSI was actually back in March of 2020. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to expand it out. Now we're going to look at longer term RSIs that hopefully will be a little bit more informative on sort of the macro moves in the market, rather than getting so focused on what's happening on the daily time frame. First, we can go to the 3-day, okay? And that tells you a slightly different story, slightly longer, basically you can think of it, the longer the time frame, probably the more relevant the information is to you, especially because I consider that most people that watch this channel are more macro investors than day traders. I imagine the longer the time frame, the more useful this information is to you. So if we do the same exercise and just sort of draw a line over the entire Bitcoin history and look simply at the 3-day RSI and say, okay, well, when was the last time that Bitcoin was at this level? The last time was, in fact, in March of 2020. And then the time before that was again at the end of 2018. And then interestingly, you can see that we didn't get this low during the entire bear market of 2018, except for at the very end. Okay, so this is what I do find interesting, and this is what, and we'll talk a little bit more about this at the end, is that it seems like this cycle, Bitcoin has just gotten really good at going wherever it's going to go without spending too much time in between. And then to get, to go even further back, before November, December of 2018, the last time was in January of 2015, which was actually that market cycle bottom, and then also in September of 2014, which was just a couple of months, about 3 or 4 months before that bottom. Okay, and then you can also see that we almost came down to this level at this bottom over here back in November of 2011. So we certainly have been at this level before, the last time being in March of 2020, and then the time before that being in November of 2018. Note that both of those prior times, we technically did go lower than we currently are on Bitcoin's daily RSI and its 3-day RSI. Now, to continue to expand this out and look at even longer time frames, let's go look at the 1 week time frame and see what does that show. How far are we oversold yet on the weekly? Well, remember, technically, we would say 30. If it's below 30, you would call it technically oversold. And Bitcoin on the weekly RSI has not been below 30 very many times. I mean, you can see that this line right here is 30. The only times it's been below 30 was in January of 2015, which was this market cycle bottom, and in December of 2018, which was this bottom right here. The March 2020 capitulation didn't even get us to being technically oversold on the weekly time frame because it happened so quickly and then we recovered pretty quickly. So where we are today, if we draw a line and go through the same exercise, and then we'll delete these circles so we can see a little bit clearer. The last time that we were at this level on the weekly RSI was again in March of 2020 and in the end of 2018, and then in the very beginning of 2015, and then as well in October of 2014. So what we're showing here is that, and this is one of the things I've said in some of the recent videos, is that I mean, again, like everyone has a prediction, right? They sort of all stink, right? But everyone has their own predictions, and including my own. I'm not saying that about others. I'm talking about my own. But the thing is one of the things I've said is I'm looking to see Bitcoin potentially put in a bottom in the first half of this year. Okay, and to hopefully see some type of momentum shift at that point. And look, it could come sooner rather than later. It just depends on, I mean, a lot of it, I think, as I've said before, depends on the volume coming in on a potential liquidation event, and really wanting to see, you know, Bitcoin move back in the other direction in a very strong and convincing manner. One of the things we've noted ever since Bitcoin left 69K is that every single bounce has been so weak, and it's been instantly sold off. You know, even at 40K, it only bounced up to 44K. Again, it's a bounce for ants, right? No, it's just relatively unexciting. It's not anything that impressive. And so right now, when again looking at the weekly RSI, well, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say the bottom's in, because there's a good chance it's not, right? There's definitely a good chance it's not. But I mean, it does look like the people that can just sort of weather this storm for a while will come out stronger on the other side. I know it's cliche, but I mean, you can look at the history. You can look at the chart for Bitcoin. You can see what's happened before, right? And you'll note that while it was scary at the time, if you just held on, like if you just sort of held on here and here and even over here, which is pretty similar to the current level, in fact, you would have come out the other side. Even if it means you need to wait a little bit longer, right? Even if it means it's not going to be over today or tomorrow or next week or maybe not even this quarter, okay? But if you can, I don't know, find something to distract you for a little while, and if you need to check out of the cryptoverse, look, we'll still be here. We'll still be here in 3 months. We'll still be here in 6 months. Okay, we'll still be here. So just try to get through this time. And look, I mean, I know that we could go lower. I'm not going to claim that we can't. In general, my expectations are to just basically assume that the trend is your friend until the end, right? And until we actually see some type of shift back the other way, what's the point of calling the bottom, right? Because more than likely, if you try to call the bottom, you're just going to look like a fool, right? You're going to look like a fool a few days later when we probably just go below it. So I would say, don't try to get too, you know, don't try to get too picky about calling the bottom. Just come up with a plan and say, you know what? If you want to buy Bitcoin at these lower prices that we're experiencing today, you could just ladder in buys at prices lower than where we currently are. You know, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I don't offer financial advice. But that's what I would say. I would say one of the best ways to navigate these markets is to either wait for this dilemma we're in to be over, even if it means missing the bottom, right? Because if you don't buy until there's an actual like shift back the other direction, then clearly you missed the bottom, right? Clearly. But maybe that's okay. You know, I mean, maybe it's okay if you miss the bottom, if that's the price you pay for, you know, for not DCing in a downtrend. And that's not a bad thing. Okay, I think everyone sort of needs to have their own strategy there. But when you look at the weekly RSI, you can see the times we were this oversold, and so that's why I'm hopeful that we'll be able to put in a bottom, hopefully within the first 2 quarters of this year. The only thing I'm not 100% sure about, well, there's a lot. I mean, everything I'm not 100% sure about, right? But some of the things I'm trying to still work out in my head is, you know, let's say we do see some type of a bottom, right, at you know, within the first quarter or second quarter, maybe either the first or second quarter of this year, and then we do bounce. I wonder if that bounce is going to be sustained immediately and we'll just trend higher and everyone will be in disbelief, or if we then have to come back down and maybe put in a double bottom, or maybe this is the double bottom that we're seeing right now. Maybe this is the double bottom, and the first test of 29K was the first bottom, and then we're going to put in the second one. But I did want to just show you these longer time frame RSIs. Now, to go even longer, we can look at the 2-week RSI, and let's just say, you know what? When has the 2-week RSI been this low for Bitcoin? The first thing we'll note is when looking at the 2-week RSI, we've never technically been oversold, technically speaking, on the 2-week RSI, meaning below 30, okay? So if we go look at where we are today and do our favorite little drill here of just simply drawing a line across and saying, all right, well, when has Bitcoin seen a 2-week RSI this low? It's happened a few times, okay? So as always, in March of 2020, a lot of you didn't experience March of 2020. I can assure you, actually, it was a lot worse than it was so far today. I mean, it was about a 70% drop, you know, from the 14K level down to the $3,800 level, about a 70% drop. And if you think what you're going through today is worse than that 70% drop we experienced in a relatively short period of time, just to prove it to you, right? This is a 63% drop, but as measured from this local top over here, it was about a 71 to 72% drop. Today, just to give you an idea of the pain that we felt in that short amount of time, let's take it from the November high. To go down 71%, you're talking about Bitcoin going back to the prior all-time high. So while I'm not saying that Bitcoin is going to go to the prior all-time high, I mean, it could. That is where the 200-week SMA is. But that would give you an idea of the pain that we felt back in 2020 when it dropped such a large amount in a very short period of time. So that's why you could easily argue that, again, the March 2020 capitulation, as it currently stands, is still worse than the one we're experiencing right now. And so clearly the March 2020 capitulation had a 2-week RSI lower than where we currently are. And then the other ones being in the end of the bear market over here, and then the end of this bear market back in 2014, 2015. One of the interesting things that we've talked about before, and I just want to reiterate it in a few videos because I know not everyone watches every single video. There's no reason to, but it's sort of the idea that this corrective phase, or at least this bear market in terms of the demand for Bitcoin, ended back in early 2021. And you can actually see this reflected on so many things. And we've mentioned it, the social statistics, the on-chain data, but just look at the RSI, in fact. Look at the RSI of this mania phase right here compared to the second one. I mean, there just hasn't been any new retail entering anytime recently. So, well, some people are sitting here thinking that, like, you know, it's likely going to take like a year to find a bottom. I actually think we'll find it relatively quickly, probably within the first half of this year. You know, do we need to go back and revisit it a few months later if we bounce? I don't know about that yet. I really don't know. But I would say it's looking like, I mean, again, I'm just looking at the data, and it's easy to you know, want the bottom to come sooner rather than later. I mean, obviously that would be nice. But again, just comparing where we are today to where we have been at other times when the 2-week RSI was this low, we can see that as long as you weathered the storm for a few months, things did eventually get better, even if at the time it looked awful. Okay, even if at the time it looked awful. And look, we could go lower, right? We could easily go 30K, we could go sub 30K, we could go 25K, we could go 20K. Those things could happen. So I don't want to say that they can't. They could happen. It just is it basically just depends on, you know, are we in a similar position of, say, like, you know, September of 2014, where we were getting close to the bottom in terms of time, but we still had, you know, maybe another 40% to drop? Or is it more similar to, say, November 2018 when we were, well, that was also about a final capitulation as well there, about the same amount? Or is it more like March of 2020 when we just needed to go down a little bit further to get to this bottom on the 2-week RSI? I don't know, right? I don't know. I mean, I think the point is no one knows where the bottom is, but in terms of a time frame, it would at least seem somewhat likely that in the next few months we should see a momentum shift back the other direction. even if that momentum shift occurs at a price lower than it is right now, and then we have to build out a base there and then ultimately trend higher. So, and then going over to say the 1 month RSI and looking at that, this is what it looks like. Okay, so the lowest the 1 month RSI has really ever been has been about 42, 43. Okay, and right now the monthly RSI is sitting at approximately 50. Okay, the last time the monthly RSI was this low, again, you guessed it, was in March of 2020, and we actually just went slightly below where we currently are. We went to about a monthly RSI of approximately 47. Okay, and right now we're at about 50. So even to get to the March levels of on the relative strength index on the monthly time frame, it still would mean we could go a bit lower. So hopefully this provides some perspective on the market. Again, I'm not claiming I know where the bottom is. I don't, but I do want to just draw your attention to the prior times in Bitcoin's life where the relative strength index did hit these levels. The last time under basically every single circumstance we looked at, in terms of the daily, the 3-day, the weekly, the 2-week, the monthly, for the most part, the last time we hit these levels was back in March of 2020, and then the time before that was at the very end of the bear market in 2018. And so now we're just sort of waiting and kind of seeing what unfolds here over the next couple of months, because there will, there will be a trend shift at some point, and more than likely we will measure future returns from whatever the bottom ends up being. It's always easy to look back and say, if you bought it at $3,800 in March of 2020 and then you sold at the top, you were up 15x or 17, 18x or something. Not many people bought at $3,800. In the same way, not a lot of people bought at $3,100, which is also where we like to measure things from. And in the prior market cycle, which Bitcoin saw go up 100x, not a lot of people bought at this bottom over here, even though a lot of people like to measure it from that level, including myself. So the reality is that by the time the bottom is in, wherever it is, I don't know where it is. Maybe we already put it in, maybe we didn't. But wherever it is, we likely will measure things. So look, the strategies you can take, you can either DCA and wait, just DCA however often and then just be patient, or you can just sit out of the market in terms of putting new money in and then just wait and see when there's going to actually be a trend shift in the market, and then just wait for a little bit more clarity. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up. We have the premium list into thecryptoverse.com. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.